So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover that day's newspaper in a very short span of time within 20 minutes. Okay, now we are going to be covering September 6, 2024's important news items, and the important news items we are going to be covering in 20 minutes alone. We are doing this in 20 minutes. Why? Because you are civil services aspirants, right? And for you, time is of the essence. So we don't want to take much of your time, but we also want that you cover your current affairs on a daily basis, right? So we have shortlisted the important news items from today's newspapers, and those shortlisted news items are going to be covered in this lecture. All right. So let's take a look at those shortlisted news items which are important from the perspective of civil services examination. So in total, in today's lecture, we are going to be covering 4 topics, and these are of extreme importance for your UPSC examination. Now, topic number 1 is with respect to the constitution of 23rd Law Commission of India. Recently, a government notification came out with respect to the constitution of 23rd Law Commission of India. Now, what is Law Commission? How is it selected? How is it constituted? We'll talk about this. Then recently, European Union, UK, USA have signed a treaty regarding AI. And this is the first legally binding treaty. So we'll talk about this. Then NASA recently confirmed that Saturn's rings are going to disappear on March 2025. Now, what is this phenomena? This phenomena is basically an optical illusion. But we'll talk about this phenomena. And in the end, we'll talk about World Trade Organization, WTO's Goods Trade Barometer report. So, what is the situation regarding international trade in goods? We'll talk about this through this topic. Okay, so without much delay, let's start with topic number 1, which is 23rd Law Commission of India. Now, Law Ministry, Ministry of Law and Justice, Legal Affairs Department has notified the constitution of 23rd Law Commission of India. And why did this notification come? Because the term for 22nd Law Commission ended on August 31st. So August 31st was the last day for 22nd Law Commission, and that is why a new Law Commission had to be established, and that is why this notification came on September the 1st. Now, 23rd Law Commission will have a tenure of 3 years. It will have a full-time chairperson, 4 full-time members, not more than 5 part-time members, and secretaries of legal affairs and legislative departments. Okay, now let's talk about Law Commission in detail. What is Law Commission? So remember, Law Commission is a non-statutory commission. It is not established through a law. It is only established through a government notification in the Gazette. Okay? And the purpose of Law Commission is very simple. It has 3 major functions. It reviews the existing laws. It suggests the repealing of old obsolete laws. And it makes recommendations on different matters that the government has referred to it. Okay? Now, the commission is usually chaired by a of the Supreme Court, but through a notification, government can also put in place serving judges in this commission. Okay, depends on the government. Generally, retired judges of Supreme Court or High Court serve as chairmen and members of this commission, but serving judges can also come into this commission. Now, the 22nd, up till now, since independence, 22 law commissions have been appointed, and all these law commissions have in total published 289 reports to the government. Okay, so this is the time for 23rd Law Commission. Since 1947, 22 law commissions have been established and they have in total submitted 289 reports. Now, generally, government accepts the recommendations made in these reports, but it is not mandatory for the government to accept these recommendations. Okay, just remember this fact. It's not mandatory for the government to accept the recommendations made in these reports. Okay, now, let's talk in detail about the 23rd Law Commission. So the chairperson and members of Law Commission, 23rd Law Commissions have not yet been appointed. But the decision for their appointment is going to be taken by Appointments Committee of Cabinet, which is going to be chaired by Prime Minister. Okay. Now, if the chairperson is not a serving judge, look, if a serving judge is a member or the chair of this commission, then he or she won't receive any extra salary. The salary given to a judge will be the only salary that he or she shall receive. Okay, but if that member is not a serving judge, okay, either he's retired or he's an eminent lawyer, right? If the chairperson or the member is not a serving judge, then they are entitled to a salary of 2.5 lakh. Members receive 2.25 lakh salary, okay, and the member secretary should be an officer of the Indian Legal Service of the rank of secretary. Okay, just remember this fact. All right. Now let's move on to second news item, which is first legally binding pact on AI. Now, the United States, European Union, and United Kingdom are expected to sign the Council of Europe's Convention on Artificial Intelligence. Now, this convention is the first legally binding international treaty on the use of AI, how AI should be used, developed, and evolved. Okay, so UK, US, and EU are going to sign this convention. The official name for this convention is Council of Europe Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights, Democracy, and Rule of Law. Okay, now let's talk about this treaty. So, this treaty was drafted. It has taken around 2 years, 24 months to draft this treaty, and the inputs were given by 50 countries. So, 50 countries together drafted this treaty in 24 months. It adopts a risk-based approach to design, develop, and use and decommissioning of AI systems. So, how AI should be designed, they should be developed, they should be used, and they should be decommissioned or dropped. Okay. Now, it actually outlines everything. And it follows a risk-based approach, means that if a particular technology is risky, then more safeguards are put in place for that. Okay. It covers the use of AI systems in public and private sector both and is applicable across different geographies. Now, remember this fact. Look, this treaty puts human rights at the center of its center point. Okay. It holds that all the people who are signing this treaty, in case in their country any harmful or discriminatory outcomes come out of AI systems, then they are held responsible. AI should be developed, designed, evolved, but it should not harm on human rights. So human rights are put at the center of this treaty. Okay. Now, this treaty actually puts certain obligations on its signatories. So all the members who are signing this treaty have three obligations: that their AI systems are consistent with human rights. These systems are not used to undermine the integrity, independence, and effectiveness of democratic institutions and processes. Look, in the world of deep fakes, right, AI is being used to undermine elections. So these members have to ensure that this is not being done. Democratic institutions and elections and processes are not undermined. And these countries have to put in place measures to protect democratic processes in the context of activities within the life cycle of artificial intelligence systems. Okay. Now, this is a good treaty. It is a good start. But the thing is that critics have pointed out certain issues with this treaty. Okay. Now, there are three criticisms in particular. First of all, the entire everything that is written, all the obligations mentioned in this treaty have certain exemptions, and those exemptions are national security, research, and development. So, it can be impinged upon if national security is in the question. Now, this is a big loophole, and this is what is being criticized. That in the name of national security, research, and development, you might impinge on human rights. Okay. Now, even though the treaty is being called legally binding, there are concerns that it does not contain provisions for penalties. Now, look, people are calling this treaty legally binding. That means everyone, every signatory has to follow its instructions. But what if they don't follow? Then what punishment would they get? There is no written word for punishment. Okay? So, though it is written that this treaty is legally binding, but if someone does not follow the instructions given in this treaty, then there are no punishments given. So, in a way, yes, this is a legally binding treaty, but in name only, because if someone violates this treaty, there is no punishment for it. So, it lacks teeth. Compliance is primarily ensured through monitoring, which is not much of a deterrent. Okay, again, this point, third point, is in continuation of the second point. Okay, if there are no punishments, critics feel that nobody is going to follow this treaty. All right, that's about it. Now let's move on to our third news item, which is Saturn's rings to disappear. Now Saturn is famous for its rings, right? But these rings are going to disappear on March 2025. Now look, these rings are not going to disappear in reality. They're not going to disappear. Okay? It's just that these rings are not going to be visible from Earth during this month. Okay? They will exist in reality, but they are not going to be visible from Earth. It's sort of an optical illusion. Okay? So if someone is looking at Saturn from their telescope on Earth, they won't be able to see Saturn's rings on March 2025, in March 2025. All right? Phenomena last occurred in 2009. So Saturn's rings are not going to actually disappear. They are not going to be just visible from Earth. Okay. Now, what is the scientific explanation for this? How is this going to be possible? Now, look, Saturn is tilted at an angle of 26.73. Okay, so Saturn is kind of like this. It is tilted. Okay. Now, Saturn takes 29.4 Earth years to complete one single orbit of the Sun. So, almost 30 years. Saturn takes 30 years to complete one round of the Sun. Alright? That means for 15 years, Saturn is tilted towards the Sun. And for other 15 years, Saturn is tilted away from the Sun. Similarly, these rings are also tilted towards the Sun and away from the Sun. Okay, because of this angle. For 15 years. Now, every 13 to 15 years, the Saturn's rings are placed in such a way that it directly aligns with the Earth. Okay, and because it directly aligns with the Earth, these rings appear like a single line. Okay, they completely align with Earth, and because of that, they look like a single line. And this single line is unable or it's not visible. Why? Because it's very thin. Okay, and the light does not get reflected that much from it. So every 13 to 15 years, the edge of Saturn's rings align directly with the Earth. This is what will happen in March 2025. Since Saturn's rings are very thin, just tens of meters thick in most places, at this position, they will reflect very little light, essentially making them invisible. Okay? So from this information that I just discussed with you, you just have to remember the angle of inclination of Saturn, 1 year in Saturn. Okay? How much time Saturn takes to complete one revolution. Alright? And because of these two facts, at times, Saturn's rings are very thin, or Saturn's rings are completely aligned with that of the Earth's orbit. And that is why they appear very thin, so thin that they are unable to reflect light and we cannot see them. Alright? So remember this fact that Saturn's rings are not going invisible. Oh, I'm sorry. Saturn's rings are not disappearing actually. It's just the fact that every 13 to 15 years, they are aligned with the Earth in such a way that they become invisible. It's just an optical illusion. Okay? But the thing is, scientists say that eventually, sometime in future, very distant future, Saturn's rings are actually going to disappear in reality. NASA says that from 300 million years from now, Saturn will completely lose its rings. Okay? NASA confirmed in 2018 that Saturn will indeed lose its rings for good due to planet's gravity and magnetic field. So because of Saturn's gravity and magnetic field, the material in these rings is dropping towards Saturn. Okay? And within 300 million years or so, they will completely disappear. There is a phenomena that happens on Saturn which is known as ring rain. You see, much of the material in Saturn's rings is made up of ice and rock. And when Saturn pulls this material towards itself due to its gravity, this ice gets melted and rocks drop, and these ice also drop in the form of water or other water products on Saturn. This phenomena is known as ring rain, right? And every half an hour, enough water is dropped on Saturn that can fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. All right? So within 300 million years, Saturn will completely lose its rings. Now, the rings on Saturn actually came about 100 million years ago. All right? And that was due to the collision of two icy moons. So Saturn had two icy moons. When both of them collided, it released a lot of particles, and those particles started revolving around Saturn, and hence we see Saturn's rings. Okay? So it will disappear in 300 million years, and they were formed 100 million years ago. All right? And our last news item, which is WTO Goods Trade Barometer. Now, WTO every now and then comes out with Goods Trade Barometer. Now, what is this barometer? It is basically a score. Okay? It is basically a number. This Goods Trade Barometer is a number. Now, if this number is greater than 100, then that means goods trade internationally is growing above trend. Okay? So, if this number is greater than 100, then merchandise trade or goods trade, international global goods trade is increasing, it's growing. And if it's less than 100, then it is not growing or it is not growing, it is growing lesser than the trend. Okay, so growth is less in case the score is less than 100, growth is more in case the score is more than 100. Now, along with goods trade barometer, this number, WTO also publishes a report. And in that report, WTO has mentioned that Indian merchandise exports could likely improve in the second half of the year. Currently, the news is very bad as far as India is concerned because India's export numbers have declined in the first half of 2024. Right? But WTO says that these numbers might improve. Though, there are certain downside risks for India. One downside risk is that Indian products has weak demand in advanced economies, especially Europe. Right? If this continues, then Indian merchandise exports won't improve in the second half also. But if this does not happen, then Indian exports would improve. Okay. Now let's talk a bit more about goods trade barometer. So it is the world's leading composite indicator that highlights the turning points in global merchandise trade. Remember, global trade happens in goods, which we call merchandise. It also happens in services. Goods trade barometer, as the name suggests, only measures international trade in goods, not services. Now, this is released on a quarterly basis. So, WTO releases this every quarter. Okay. It provides real-time data on trajectory of merchandise trade relative to current trends. Now, see this. I mentioned this before. Values higher than 100 indicates above trend growth, and values less than 100 indicate below trend growth. All right. So yeah, that's about it. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I hope it has added value to your preparation, though it would add more value if you're consistent and regular with this lecture series. By the way, if you want to download the notes for this lecture, if you want to download a PDF file in which the entire notes for this lecture are given in detail, you can download that PDF from our Telegram channel. Okay. The link to our Telegram channel is given in the comment section below. So check that out. Go to our Telegram channel, download this PDF, study that PDF, consolidate your current affairs. All right. On that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much, everyone.